There's a microphone coming. Yes, you do. Because we're going to check it for the live feed, too. So this is a handheld microphone. I didn't get a chance to tell the microphone people this, but this is a handheld microphone that will be available beside the stage in the highly unlikely event that something goes wrong with the headset microphones.
Thank you. Perfect. Okay, so I am Corrine Moscato. I'm the person that's emailed you in the past about the competition. So congratulations, everyone, for being here. You are the top competitors from your universities, and that's super exciting. So I think most of what Natalie and I will have to say today, you probably already know, but we'll go over a little bit of just how the competition is going to work in here for you today. You can have some time to walk around on the stage and stuff.
since we...
Do that. Is that all Waterloo people?
Yeah,
Oh, that's real cute, man. That's real cute.
I know.
I like
That's
that.
what I was saying to Andrew at the season Kin. And
Yeah.
so, like, whenever someone in Kin does anything,
Everybody.
everyone in Kin does it.
Like, no matter
shows
what
up.
year you're in, like,
No.
you're there.
Well, like, it would be more just, like, everyone that you know would go. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter what year. It's just, like, if you're friends with them. Like,
Yeah.
Kin's, like, pretty...
Family.
Yeah.
Okay.
We...
Go up and, like, say their name?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Should I ask people to take their seats? Is that a thing I'm supposed to do?
Did she say that she...
She said she'd cue us to start, but everyone's seated,
Okay.
seated anyways. I'm going to skip that part.
Yeah. Is this microphone okay for you? We can make it higher if you like.
I'll just yell.
Okay.
Scream.
yes or no. Yeah. Well, she'll make it obvious, I guess.
Is it on?
Yeah, I think so. We'll try it out.
All right, good morning and welcome everyone. My name's Sarah Oikawa.
And I am Severa West. We are your hosts for the 2019 Ontario 3-Minute Thesis Competition. Before we go any further, we would like to acknowledge that the land on which we gather today is the traditional territory of the Mississauga and Haudenosaunee Nations. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement.
On behalf of the McMaster University community, we would like to welcome you to our main campus located in Hamilton, Ontario. We had hoped that spring would have sprung a little earlier, giving all of our visitors a more colorful taste of this beautiful campus. But as is usual in Southern Ontario, we could be in shorts tomorrow and donning winter coats the next day. I'm a fourth-year PhD student in the Department of Kinesiology at McMaster and have spent the last year working on behalf of the Graduate Student Association as part of the executive committee. I'd also like to share that I have no experience presenting in the 3-minute thesis competition. I did, however, host this stage as an MC during the preliminary heats in our McMaster competition in March. Those 2 heats gave me an excellent picture of the time and effort students give to this experience. Severa, I believe you have some experience with the 3MT.
I do. Like you, I emceed the McMaster 3-Minute Thesis twice, but in between those 2 gigs, when I was completing my master's in neuroscience, I decided to present my very own 3MT. And yes, it was a lot of work, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. Now, as an MD PhD student and the host of a radio program which highlights graduate student research, I strongly believe in the importance and power of sharing our research and its impact that it has on the lives of people nationally and internationally.
For the past several weeks, graduate research universities across Ontario have held their campus-wide competitions, and we have 19 representatives from those universities sitting in this concert hall right now. Congratulations to each and every one of you for a job well done.
The energy in this room is pretty obvious, so I'm pretty sure that our competitors would like to get started. So I think this is the perfect time to go over the details of the competition so our first presenter can take the stage. The Ontario 3-Minute Thesis, or the 3MT, is a province-wide competition for research-based master's and doctoral students. Each university here today has run its own internal competition, and the top eligible representative has traveled to McMaster to compete for the provincial title. Joining us in the concert hall, we have students as far away as from Thunder Bay and Sudbury, and as local to us as Niagara, Guelph, and Toronto. It's exciting to see so many early-stage researchers from such a diversity of disciplines and fields. The Ontario 3MT is a great opportunity for competitors to showcase the innovative and significant research undertaken by graduate students across the province.
So what exactly is the 3MT? Competitors have 1 static slide and 3 minutes to explain the breadth and significance of their research to a non-specialist audience. And the person who is crowned champion today will be awarded $1,000. Their name is immortalized on the provincial 3-minute thesis trophy. And of course, they and their institution will own the 3MT bragging rights for a full year.
So if I were to mention that McMaster's very own Matthew Barry, at this moment, is the reigning champion of the Ontario 3MT, that would be totally okay. Hey, Matthew.
For the next couple of hours anyways. The second and third place winners will also receive cash prizes, $500 and $250 respectively. Additionally, the top 5 finalists today will compete in the national 3-minute thesis competition as Canadian Association of Graduate School finalists. Also, a competitor's choice voted on by today's presenters will be awarded after the final.
From firsthand experience, I know that it is tough to stand up here and present a 3-minute thesis. But just as difficult is determining who will win that 3MT title. So that brings us to our judges. First, please welcome Emily Chung. Emily is an award-winning Toronto-based journalist who reports on science and the environment for CBC News. Emily started writing for newspapers and magazines while doing her undergrad in biology and chemistry at Western University and her doctorate in chemistry at the University of British Columbia. After that, she interned at the Toronto Star and worked for the Vancouver Sun before joining CBC News in 2006. Since 2010, she has been focused on national and science technology reporting and is a past board member of the Science Writers and Communicators of Canada and a current member of the Girls in STEM Executive Advisory Council for FIRST Canada. Now, please welcome Rob Baker. Rob is best known as a member of the Tragically Hip. He was inducted into the Canadian Music Hall of Fame in 2005 and 2017 and was made a Companion of the Order of Canada. Rob is a graduate of Queen's University and has put his visual art studies to use, designing many of the band's t-shirts and album art. He is currently working on his third album with his band, Strippers Union. Rob has always been a big supporter of his community, giving his time, money, and profile to local and national charities with a focus on medical, musical, and environmental causes. This is Rob's 7th time judging the provincial 3MT.
Now, please welcome Jane Travers. Jane is the Vice President for Asset Management and Optimization at the Ontario Power Generation. As such, she is responsible for the optimization of renewable generation's fleet. Prior to this, she was the Acting Production Manager of Niagara Operations. Jane has held a variety of senior manager positions for renewable generation in engineering and operations. Her career started in OPG's nuclear division, working briefly at the Darlington Nuclear Generating Station while it was under construction, followed by an extensive run supporting the specialized inspection of CANDU reactors in Ontario, Quebec, New Brunswick, and South Korea. Jane holds a Bachelor of Engineering, Mechanical Engineering degree from McMaster University and has been a member of the Professional Engineers of Ontario since 1991. She's actively involved in leadership initiatives in the area of recruitment, diversity, inclusion, and cultural change. Next, please welcome Tim Podesic. Tim is co-owner and president of the 23-year-old Sonic Onion Records in Hamilton. Over the years, Tim has sat on the boards of the Canadian Institutional Research and Planning Association and the Canadian Association of Recording Arts and Sciences. He has enjoyed the Canadian Music Industry Award for Label of the Year, Hamilton Entrepreneur of the Year Award, and several of his artists have received Juno nominations. Tim currently sits on the boards of the Canadian Independent Music Association and Foundation to Assist Canadian Talent on Record. In 2009, Tim became lead organizer of Hamilton's annual Supercrawl Festival. Supercrawl has won several tourism festivals of Festival of the Year awards. Highly recommend that you attend if you're ever here in September. Currently, Sonic Onion operates Mills Hardware in downtown Hamilton and is expanding its festival and live event focus.
And to complete our adjudication panel, please welcome Pearl Venema. Pearl is president and CEO of Hamilton Health Sciences Foundation. She also serves on the board of trustees for Children's Miracle Network and is a member of the Mohawk College Foundation Board and the McKay CEO Forum. Prior to joining the foundation, Pearl served as president and chief development officer of the Orthopedic and Arthritic Foundation. Also, she was managing director of campaigns and vice president advancement for the University Health Network's Toronto General and Western Hospital Foundation. Pearl is a fellow of the Association for Healthcare Philanthropy and certified fundraising executive with CFRE International. She has received the association's Harold J. Seymour Award in recognition of her excellence in fostering philanthropy. Pearl is a contributing author for the first Canadian fundraising textbook, Excellence in Fundraising.
In determining the top presentation in today's competition, our judges will be looking for a few specific things. One is communication style. For example, was language and terminology clear and understandable? Did the slide enhance rather than detract from the talk? And did the presenter use nonverbal communication effectively? They will also consider comprehension. Did the presentation help the audience understand the scholarly research and creativity? Did the presenter clearly outline the nature and purpose of the scholarly research and creativity? Did they share what is interesting about their research? And finally, engagement. Did the presentation make the judges and the audience want to know more? Did the presenter convey enthusiasm for their work?
And now let's discuss the rules. A single static PowerPoint slide is permitted. That means no slide transitions, animations, or movement of any description. And the slide must be presented from the beginning of the presentation. No additional electronic media such as sound and/or video files are permitted. No additional props such as costumes, musical instruments, or lab equipment can be used. So put away those pipettes. No notes or cue cards can be used. Presentations are limited to 3 minutes maximum, and competitors exceeding 3 minutes are disqualified. Presentations are to be spoken only, so competitors cannot recite poems, rap, or sing. Presentations are considered to have commenced when a presenter starts their presentation either through movement or speech. And the decision of the adjudicating panel is final.
This year, we will be pausing for 1 minute between each competitor so that our judges can gather their thoughts and reflect on what they've just heard and seen. During that time, our live and virtual audience will be treated to a musical interlude. We ask that if you need to leave during the competition, please wait until the minute pause between competitors. After the first 9 competitors, we will take a 15-minute break.
Is that it, Sarah?
I think that's it.
Okay, everyone, please take this time to turn off your cell phones and any other electronic devices and take a deep breath. It is now time to begin the 2019 Ontario 3-Minute Thesis. Please welcome our first presenter of the morning, from the University of Ottawa, Stephanie Woodworth.
Kinesiology is the study of human movement, yet water is taken for granted in the fields of research, teaching, and practices. This is shocking, given that humans are mostly water, and access to water fundamentally shapes human lives. As a student in the field, I wanted to further explore this relationship between water and human movement. Then, at the beginning of my degree, I had an opportunity to attend a water walk. While walking with the copper vessel filled with the lake's water, for the first time ever, I felt a spiritual connection to water, and my research question emerged. How do the water walks connect people to water? Tracing back, the water walk started in 2003 when Anishinaabe grandmother Josephine Mondamin gathered a group of grandmothers to walk around Lake Superior in ceremony. By walking and stopping within each of the communities, they intended to build sacred relationships between the people and the lake. Since then, Josephine walked around all the Great Lakes and numerous other water bodies, and inspired countless people from around the world to start water walks in their communities. With Josephine's support, I worked with the coordinator of the water walks, Joanne Robertson, to gather water walkers' online stories from 2003 to 2018, which were harvested in a public archive, and over 100 water walks were mapped using a digital story map. The archive and map will be housed at the Anishinaabe Discovery Centre in Garden River, Ontario, to be used as a teaching tool for Anishinaabe studies programs and for the public. For the water walkers to maintain ownership of their stories, my thesis became a decolonizing autoethnography, a critical self-reflection of my position as a white settler woman doing research with Anishinaabe people. Through storytelling, I analyze how coloniality shapes the production of knowledge in kinesiology and the ways water is missing from the field. By participating in 5 water walks, I learned that the water walks connect people to water by walking around and for water bodies with intention and attention to our collective responsibility as humans to protect, heal, care for, and love water. Every step is a prayer, and each step builds a reciprocal relationship between the water walker and Mother Earth. Grandmother Josephine walked the talk. Sadly, she passed away February of this year, though her mission to protect water is carried by all those inspired by her. This research is dedicated to her. Niga zichigi nibe onji. I will do it for the water.
Next, please welcome Miriam Almersafi from Wilfrid Laurier University.
Imagine a crystal clear lake, the water as still as glass. You can see fish, birds, and beautiful vibrant colors. You just know that life in and around this lake thrives. Unfortunately, every day this image gets further and further away from reality. We humans have created an excess of carbon dioxide and methane in the atmosphere that will continue to terrorize our planet. One major consequence of climate change is an increase in temperature and a decrease in rainfall. What's scary about that is it causes freshwater lakes to evaporate. And when lakes evaporate because there's too much heat and very little rain, salt concentrates and freshwater animals pay the price. So what that feels like for a freshwater animal is how you would feel running a marathon that had no brakes. The first animals affected by lake salinization are freshwater invertebrate called the water flea. But these are not the type of fleas you want to get rid of. Water fleas are at the bottom of the aquatic food chain, and many animals, such as fish, rely on them for survival. Many researchers believe that the water flea has the potential for rapid evolution because they reproduce by cloning themselves and can pass on a tolerant gene to their offspring in a changing environment. So this gives us some hope that freshwater ecosystems may be able to sustain themselves into the future. However, there's very little research on their actual ability to adapt to changing environments through time. I study a remote lake in North Dakota, USA, that previous researchers have found salinity has naturally gone up and down for millennia because this region is geographically prone to drought. So one way to predict if the water flea will be able to tolerate salinity into the future is to see if it's tolerated it in the past. What if I told you that there's a way to go back in time and see if the water flea survived during the 1930s Dust Bowl, one of the most destructive droughts in US history? Well, with my research, there is a way. I'm using an approach called resurrection ecology, where I hatch water flea eggs that have remained dormant and viable in the lake sediment for centuries. I collected a meter-long core and determined that each centimeter through the depth of the core goes back 5 years in time. So that's 500 years worth of data. I isolated eggs from each 5-year period and determined that they can hatch in the lab. What I found out is that I want to find if they can hatch in salt water and if they can tolerate the salt water through time. So I want you again to imagine the freshwater lake as still as crystal glass. You can see fish, birds, and beautiful vibrant colors. If we continue to take care of our planet, this will be our reality. Thank you.
Now, please welcome from York University, Lena Decker.
I want you all to imagine yourselves speaking with the people in your lives that mean the most to you. This could be your parents, friends, family members, significant others, and the list could go on. Now, if I were to tell you that when speaking with these people, you can't exactly express the way you're feeling, you can't describe the emotions you're experiencing. Unfortunately, this situation is considered the norm among individuals with autism spectrum disorder, or ASD. The inability or difficulty to communicate emotions is not an unusual situation for them. But what if there was a way that we could do to help individuals with ASD communicate with others around them? What if they could use a creative outlet such as art to fully express exactly how they are feeling with those around them? My recent research study was a preliminary study where I introduced art as a tool to see whether it would actually help individuals with ASD express and communicate their emotions. Now, there were several tasks of the study, but today I'm going to focus on one particular aspect of the study. Particularly, I want to talk about a device called the Galvanic Skin Response, or GSR. Essentially, all this device does is measure the amount of sweat your body produces to detect emotional arousal. Participants with autism were asked to connect the GSR while looking at a computer screen that presented various faces depicting different types of emotions. After, they were asked to think about a situation that made them feel a particular emotion and to draw out that emotion. Once their drawings were complete, they were asked to repeat the GSR task again. Now, a lot of interesting findings were found in the study. First, the GSR levels confirmed that individuals with ASD were able to connect with their drawings on an emotional level. This further helped them communicate their emotions as they became conscious of their feelings, experienced themselves in the art-making process, and constructed a personal sense of self. They were able to connect with their emotions as they were in charge of narrating exactly how they felt. This gave them control over their own emotions. Now, the next steps to take would be to incorporate an art-based intervention within institutions such as the education system, where individuals with ASD can use art to further help them express exactly how they are feeling with those they most love. Thank you.
Next, please put your hands together for Catherine Viscardis from Trent University.
Of a door to this room. The scratches you can see on the door were made by children who were desperately trying to get out. These children were residents of the Huronia Regional Centre in Orillia, Ontario, Canada's oldest and largest institution for children and adults with disabilities. It remained open from 1887 until 2009 and was described as a humane place for their care and protection. The reality was much different. This reality was made clear to me from my first day in the archives. Stories of physical, emotional, and sexual abuse of children, imprisonment, torture, forced abortion, sterilization, death, and even murder. Interviews with survivors corroborated these stories of an incessant violence. The experiences of children living here were far removed from notions of child protection and care. In fact, these children were victims of a large-scale, multi-institutional, century-long betrayal. And as survivors have asked me, how could they do this to children? My research finds that these abuses were not isolated nor exceptional. Violence was sadly ordinary in the facility. Its entire foundation was violent. It was created shortly after the birth of the nation, a time of colonial eugenics, when some children were labeled as medical or social problems. Children who were routinely admitted to facilities like the Orillia Asylum, where they could be locked away and out of sight. And after 122 years of violence and degradation, the Huronia Centre was finally closed. But the legacy of violence lives on. My research finds that children with disabilities continue to be warehoused in miniature institutions or group homes. There's an increasing lack of public resources to ensure community-based living and inclusion, and harmful stereotypes about disabilities persist. Listening to and learning from the stories of survivors is especially urgent because our provincial leader has reminisced over an old institution designed to imprison children with disabilities, implying that it should be reopened. Historians always say that we can learn from history. Well, this is the history of child institutionalization. Will we learn from it? The system of support must be transformed, and we must leave behind the disableism that underpins it to ensure that the institutional abuse of children truly becomes and remains a thing of the past. Thank you.
Now, welcome to the stage, Alex Corvin, representing Ryerson University.
The games that we play shape who we are because it's one of the oldest forms of social interaction and ubiquitous in everyday life, from education to entertainment. But games can also shape our perceptions. For instance, when did you first experience the thrill of wealth accumulation? Was it when you bought your first hotel chain? Or was it when someone's game token first landed on a hotel that you own in Monopoly? One of the top-selling board games of all time, but a game that has been the subject of fascinating research around human behavior and our perceptions of wealth and privilege. In fact, there's a whole field of academic study around how we can use games to teach important lessons. A team of doctors from right here at McMaster designed a board game used to teach emergency room management. Highly interactive, super low stakes. Now, what is it about the board game that makes it so popular? Well, it's an immersive experience that we share with others in person using tactile components. And this allows us to simulate endless scenarios of competition and collaboration. So my research begins by recognizing that board games are powerful tools for social engagement and collective problem solving. Because the question I ask is this: what happens if you take one of the most complex collective action problems of our time, climate change, and then engineer a board game to deliberately influence how people relate to this issue? To answer this question, I designed a board game. I researched and adapted game mechanics specifically meant to mimic attributes of climate change, and then packaged it into a game using personal transportation as the theme. So the game board is a thriving city, and you choose different ways of traveling to access resources and perform upgrades. But the game amplifies the shared impacts of everyone's actions, forcing players to react individually and collaboratively in order to win or to simply avoid disaster. So what happens when you play this game? How are real-life attitudes affected when you can artificially shorten feedback loops and accelerate consequences? Well, findings from multiple playtesting sessions show that the game pushes players to confront their biases and their frustrations towards inefficient use of common resources. In fact, after playing the game, over 2/3 of players will demonstrate a material decline in their preference towards driving fossil fuel-powered cars, which I found fascinating because we all know what it feels like to be really competitive towards something. But imagine if that drive for winning or that frustration towards losing could be linked to a degree of self-reflection about how we behave in real life. Because we know that for some, that self-reflection is what's needed to inspire a shift in mindset. And then maybe one day, for the sake of our planet, a shift in behavior. Thank you.
Next up, please welcome from the Royal Military College, David Patch.
It's slippery, it's sneaky, it's in you right now, and you don't even know it. It's called PFAS, and it's just about everywhere. PFAS, which stands for per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, are a class of chemicals invented in the 1950s for use in non-stick coatings and oil-resistant materials. PFAS is chemically similar to Teflon in a lot of ways, but it has a water-loving end group, which means it's great at moving into water-containing things, like rivers, oceans, streams, and our blood. Since the 1950s, PFAS has been used in a variety of commercial products, including pizza boxes, popcorn bags, and cosmetic makeup. Not only has PFAS been found in everything, but now it's been found everywhere. It's been found in drinking water, food, household dust, and the blood of approximately 98% of all North Americans. PFAS has a long list of potential health concerns, but one of its biggest is its ability to act as a second-generational health hazard. This means if a future mother is exposed to PFAS, her children can develop neurological and autoimmune issues when they're born. As we can see, this is nasty stuff. So how do we stop it? Well, we've defined it first. PFAS does a really good job of sneaking its way into the environment. It can escape from those commercial products I mentioned before and enter into our bodies, either directly or indirectly through the food and water we all consume. If only there was someone willing to spend thousands of hours to collect a whole bunch of materials and test them to figure out what's going on. No? No takers in the audience? All right, well, I guess I'll do it. And that's what my research is, to develop artificial methods to look at the release of PFAS from commercial products. One of the biggest challenges we face is developing methods that are realistic to how the product is actually being used. For example, I could easily take a popcorn bag, scrape all the insides out, and test it for PFAS. But that's not really realistic to how people actually eat popcorn out of a popcorn bag. Unless you're the kind of person to rip open the bag and just lick all the butter off the insides, in which case you probably have much bigger concerns in your life than PFAS. You should really stop doing that. It's gross. So, how exactly do I test every possible release scenario? Well, I've gotten really good at it. For example, to look at the release of PFAS from clothing, I can expose it to sweat or detergent. To look at the release of PFAS from food packaging material, I can expose it to artificial saliva or food grease. To look at the release of PFAS from cosmetic makeup, I can expose it to artificial skin oils or undergrad students. The possibilities are endless. I can then take the data I get and use it to build models to assess the risk that different commercial products pose to the general population. So, with a lot of high-tech machinery, creativity, and commercial products, and I'm talking about a lot of commercial products, I'm identifying what kind of bad chemicals are coming out of your store-bought products so that you and your loved ones can lick pizza boxes and popcorn bags to your heart's content. Thank you very much.
Now, please welcome Anthony Incognito from the University of Guelph.
Imagine you're in Tanzania on your first African safari. You're all smiles as you gaze at the giraffes, zebras, and a lion charging straight towards your open-hatch Land Cruiser. You're filled with panic until the driver steps on the gas and the lion ceases the chase. The famously labeled fight or flight response is controlled by the sympathetic nervous system, known to be active during high-stress scenarios. But that's not the only time it's working for you. If you placed a small needle-like recording electrode into a bundle of your nerves, like in the photo to the left, you would see that your sympathetic nerves are actually turned on all the time, controlling your blood pressure. Those black clusters of electricity spikes in the middle of the screen tell us when your sympathetic nerves are active, and when they are, they can release noradrenaline, which constrict your blood vessels and raise your blood pressure. It protects us from passing out when we stand up or when we exercise. Prior to my PhD thesis, the sympathetic control of blood pressure was understood like the control of lighting in this room. To make the room brighter, turn on more light switches. To raise your blood pressure higher, turn on more sympathetic nerves, but it's more complex than this. In my first series of studies, I decided to zoom in on these nerve signals to identify differently matched, sized, and shaped spikes, like spike A and spike B, which tell us about the activity of single sympathetic nerves. And I found in young, healthy individuals that the sympathetic nervous system could selectively control these nerves differently from each other. And so each nerve had its own unique response pattern to stress. Yet, all were still unified towards a single common goal, that being fine-tuned blood pressure control. So it's not just about making the room brighter, it's about making the brightness just right. Now, what would the consequences be if we lost the ability for this fine-tuned control? I recently worked with a hypertension research group in Brazil to test how the sympathetic nerves were working in patients with high blood pressure. I found groups of nerves to behave just horribly in response to changing blood pressure, forcing other nerves to have to work harder to pick up the slack. So it looks like these patients have impairments in subgroups of sympathetic nerves, limiting their ability to control their blood pressure with fine-tuned precision. Soon I'll be traveling to the smoking capital of the world, Japan, to test the effects of smoking on the sympathetic nerves in patients with heart failure. It's this type of research that's slowly moving us towards a shift in how we treat the leading killer in the Western world, cardiovascular disease. A shift from treating the heart and blood vessels to actually treating the sympathetic nervous system. So, the next time you're being chased by a lion or giving your next standing ovation, know that your sympathetic nerves are continuously at work, fine-tuning your blood pressure to be just right. Thank you.
Next, representing Brock University, welcome Alicia Azano.
Imagine your infant is under 3 years of age, is engaging in abnormal behaviors and developmental delays. You complete an early screener which indicates signs of autism, but now you are on a wait list for diagnosis for 1.5 years or longer, which means that while waiting, you can't get access to publicly funded autism intervention for your child. This is a situation that many parents find themselves in, and it can be devastating to wait for help and support. Raise your hand if you've ever known someone with autism. According to Bio 2018, autism is now one of the most common childhood disorders, affecting 1 in 59 children. Autism is characterized by lifelong deficits in social communication and interaction and restricted and repetitive patterns of behavior. Infants who have an older sibling diagnosed with autism or who are born premature are at a higher risk of developing autism than the general population. While the median age of autism diagnosis is 4.5 years old, parents and professionals can often identify early signs of autism by 18 months of age and often sooner. That's why my research has important implications for many families who have a child at risk for autism. We recruited 6 families who have a child at risk for autism under 3 years of age. Parents first completed the Parent Observation of Early Markers Scale, also called the POEMs, to identify concerning behaviors that represent early warning signs of autism. We then trained parents to use behavior analytic teaching strategies to intervene on these core deficits. Once parents mastered the teaching, they were able to practice with their infant during the day, during natural routines in the home. We found that as parent teaching skills improved, child target skills improved as well, such as making eye contact and pointing to make requests. As child target skills improved, parents no longer rated these behaviors as concerning or less severe on repeated administration of the poems. This study suggests that before a child at risk for autism is ever diagnosed, parents have the ability to intervene and possibly reduce core symptoms of autism. Overall, parents were extremely satisfied with our program and felt their child greatly benefited. My research adds to a small but growing body of research suggesting that parents have the ability to teach their infant and improve core symptoms of autism which can impact the future development of the child. Potentially, early symptom identification using the poem screener and parent-delivered intervention has the ability to prevent or reduce severity of autism diagnosis. So why wait? Identify symptoms and start intervention right away. Thank you.
Now, please welcome Amanda Brissenden from Queen's University.
Four out of 5 Canadians will experience back pain. Take a look around. That's an awful lot of us sitting here today. Our spines work hard, giving us the freedom of movement we often take for granted, at least until that movement starts to hurt. The cause of back pain is not well understood, but the intervertebral discs are implicated in most cases. The discs are a soft tissue that separate the bony vertebrae, absorbing shock and allowing us to bend and twist. When damaged by age-related wear or trauma, there can be debilitating consequences. Right now, the only treatments are limited to pain management or invasive surgeries with poor outcomes. So, why are these tissues so hard to treat? Well, cells drive the healing process, and compared to other tissues, the discs have relatively few cells, particularly at the center, which is gel-like, composed of a network of proteins and sugars called the extracellular matrix. It's here at the center that we see the greatest changes during degeneration. So my research asks, could the disc be restored by introducing healthy cells to the center in a protective scaffold that mimics the original healthy matrix? Such a scaffold needs to draw in water to form a gel, yet withstand repeated compressions. It also needs to be injectable to protect the surrounding fragile tissues. To meet these criteria, I'm developing a tri-block polymer. A polymer is a large molecule made up of many repeating units. You can determine its properties by changing its repeating unit. So mine has a strong core to resist compression, and each repeating unit has a water-soluble side chain, shown here in blue, that draws in water to form a gel. This polymer shows an exciting property that allows it to be injected. Consider making Jell-O. You dissolve the powder in hot water, cool it down, and bang, you have a gel. My material does the opposite. It dissolves at room temperature. You could add in cells, you could inject it, but when it comes up to body temperature, you get a gel. However, what I've been describing so far is a synthetic polymer, and cells don't really interact well with synthetic materials. So to ensure the cells can interact with the final scaffold, I'm attaching the polymer to a peptide, a small piece of a naturally occurring protein. In the next 2 years, I'll be investigating how cells interact with the material and how it holds up under repeated compression. Whether this is the solution to disc disease or not, it will help us to better understand these soft tissues that have challenged medicine and been a pain in our back for so long. Thank you.
Okay, everyone, so we have completed the first flight of this year's Ontario 3-Minute Thesis. Unfortunately, University of Windsor representative John Freer was not able to be here today, so we will go on break now. So please take 15 minutes to stretch your legs. We ask you to be back in your seats at, let's say, 11:10, just a few minutes before 11:10, so we can begin again. Thanks, everyone.
We're going to be beginning again. Working. We're going to be beginning again in 1 minute. If you could please take your seats. It's now time for the second half of the 2019 3-minute thesis. Please welcome to the stage, representing Lakehead University, Alexander Billick.
Canada contains 9% of the world's forests. Now, aside from logging that for a future Trivial Pursuit win, what does that mean to the average Canadian? Well, let me put it a different way. The forests of Canada cover 700 million NFL football fields. Think about the scale of the challenge of trying to understand where every tree is, what species they are, and where they are. So whether we're talking about endangered species, we're talking about socioeconomic development, or we're talking about carbon credit monitoring for our international commitments, we have to understand this. Now, it varies province to province in this country, but by and large, the way we've done this in the past since the late 1930s is with aerial photography. We've moved from film to digital, and we've moved from grease pencils and photos, as you see in the top right corner there, to computers and drawing lines. But fundamentally, we've been inventorying our forests the same since the late 1930s. In fact, in Ontario, we just spent $100 million doing it over the last 10 years. And think about this now. It's expensive, it's slow, and it's subjective, because we rely on someone looking at it and making a subjective call at every single tree in the province. So, what are we doing next? We're actually going to spend $110 million as a province over the next 10 years doing it again. But this time, we're using lasers. We're using a newer technology called LiDAR. Think laser radar. We send out pulses of light, and we get a return. That's what the green image above there shows you. You get a cross-section of the forest to understand the tree heights, their interrelationships, and their vertical and horizontal structure. The problem is there's gaps. That's where I come in. I'm trying to fill those gaps in so we can understand the whole picture, using a technology called terrestrial LiDAR. This is something that's been used in the engineering sector. In fact, if you go on CNN this morning, it's being discussed as a way to help reconstruct Notre Dame. So terrestrial LiDAR is a proven technology, but it's a fragile one. The image at the bottom demonstrates what terrestrial LiDAR looks like in the forest environment. We understand the side of the tree. We can predict its habitat potential. We can predict the economic potential and the carbon budget potential. And using machine learning to combine terrestrial with aerial LiDAR, we get a whole picture to fill in the gap to drive our inventory into the next century at a cheaper cost, faster, and with no subjective bias. So instead of needing 2.5 minutes to explain how we inventory the forests of Canada in the future, I hope it's just a simple procedure involving lasers. Thank you very much.
Next, please welcome Chelsea Pike from Laurentian University.
Let's talk about a social issue that affects almost all Canadians. It's the leading cause of neurodevelopmental disability in Canada, with twice the prevalence of autism spectrum disorder. It affects roughly 1 in 25 Canadians. That's like a child in every classroom. It knows no bounds in terms of level of education, income, or race. It costs us an estimated $9.7 billion annually in Canada, and it's largely invisible. What is it? Fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, or FASD. FASD is a neurodevelopmental disorder caused by prenatal exposure to alcohol. The effects are lifelong and include developmental delay and complex behavioral issues. More importantly, people with FASD who do not have adequate access to education, health, and vocational supports are likely to experience problems with mental health, leave school early, run into trouble with the law, have problematic sexual behaviors, or engage in substance use. Effective public health communication, however, can greatly reduce the incidence of this preventable disorder, as well as garner support for public policies and programs that support people with FASD. Existing research around the effectiveness of FASD public health communication has focused primarily on awareness. But it's really important that we have an understanding of people's attitudes toward a health issue to identify challenges faced by public health communicators. To do this, previous studies have done a print news media analysis of articles about FASD, since media plays an important role in producing and reshaping public understanding. But is print news readership truly representative of Canadians as a whole, particularly those of reproductive age? It's the 21st century. We're looking online for our information. Our opinions and attitudes are shaped based on what we see online, what we're reading on the internet, what our friends are sharing on social media. And this is why it's imperative to dive into the online discourse around FASD. For my research, I'm looking at Facebook posts about FASD. I'm looking at the type of content in these posts. Are they about caring for someone with FASD? Are they about the shame or stigma around the disorder? I'm also using software to quantify people's reactions. So on Facebook, that's your like, love, haha, sad, and angry reactions. We'll then have a fuller understanding of what people are talking about, what people are sharing, as well as how people are reacting to it. We can use these results to inform the next communication campaign out of public health Sudbury and districts. We have the capacity to significantly reduce adverse outcomes for people with FASD, as well as the directly related economic costs. Let's make FASD more visible.
Now, please put your hands together for Melody Gavel, representing Carleton University.
$429,000. That's how many people are estimated to die from malaria every year. This means that by the time I'm done giving this presentation, 2 more people will be dead. Now, as most of you know, malaria is spread by mosquitoes. So are a lot of other nasty diseases, like dengue, West Nile, Zika. So I'd like us all to take a moment and picture a world with many, many more mosquitoes. No one looks too thrilled. Unfortunately, this is the grim reality that we are currently charging towards. You see, around the world, amphibians, like frogs and salamanders, are being wiped off the face of the earth. In fact, it's estimated that over a third of all amphibians are currently threatened with extinction. And this is a problem, because amphibians can eat thousands of mosquitoes in their lifetime. They also eat a lot of other disease-carrying pests, like black flies and sandflies. So generally, we probably want to keep amphibians around. My research looks at the impacts of pesticides on frog immune systems. Specifically, I look at a group of pesticides called neonicotinoids. Now, some of you may have heard of these on the news before, because they're the pesticide that's been implicated in killing all the bees. These pesticides are widely used. In fact, they make up over a quarter of all global insecticide sales. Their popularity is largely due to the fact that we see them as a safe alternative to our ecosystems. However, I have found the first evidence that these pesticides can have a negative impact on frog immune systems. They can cause anemia, and they can stress frogs out. Now, I don't know if your doctors have mentioned to you that stress kills. Well, the same concept applies to frogs. So, a stressed frog, much more likely to be a dead frog. The next step in my research will be to see whether or not exposure to these pesticides causes frogs to become more susceptible to disease. If I can find a link between exposure to pesticides and more diseased and dead frogs, then I can send that information to the regulatory agencies who make up the rules in terms of what is safe and what isn't for pesticide usage. Our world is already undergoing a public health crisis. But if we can help stop the extinction of frogs, then we can save lives. Thank you.
Next, please welcome Matthew Campea from McMaster University.
Cancer is horrible. Cancer treatment is horrible. If you or a loved one have gone through chemo, you know the nausea, the pains, knowing that it makes you better, even though it doesn't make you feel better. But what if your treatment came without the side effects? And what if it came from sugar, just like the ones in the food you eat? My name's Matt from the Lab for Engineered Smart Materials, and I'm here to tell you that we can use sugar to provide an effective and safe cancer drug delivery. But first, why does chemo come with so many side effects? Well, getting a cancer-killing drug to where it needs to go isn't easy. Less than 1% of the drug actually gets to the site of the cancer. The reason? Drug delivery vehicles, the small-scale materials that carry these cancer-killing drugs throughout the body, need to be in a very specific size range. Too big, and they're destroyed by your immune system. Too small, and they accidentally enter your healthy cells. Current drug delivery vehicles fail to address both of these size constraints, and instead focus solely on being small enough to enter the cancer. But if it's small enough for the cancer, it's small enough for us, meaning that this drug can enter our healthy cells and ultimately lead to those devastating side effects. Luckily, there's a better way. I'm tackling this size dilemma by using 2 different sugars, one from bread and another from pork. Kind of like the ingredients to a ham sandwich. We can use the different sizes and chemical properties of each sugar to bring a cancer-killing drug precisely where it needs to go. With simple, safe chemistry, we can take our smaller bread sugar and place a cancer-killing drug inside of it. Then take our bigger pork sugar and wrap it around it. This pork sugar is perfectly big enough to circulate throughout your body without being destroyed by your immune system. Its chemical properties allow it to specifically enter cancer cells without doing the same for your healthy cells. Once in the cancer, our smaller bread sugar is released. This sugar is perfectly small enough to move freely within the cancer to ultimately kill those horrible cells. The result? A drug delivery vehicle that's not too big, not too small, but just right. So the next time you're eating a ham sandwich, know that it's not just delivering nutrients to your muscles. It's delivering a better quality of life to your loved ones. Thank you.
Next is Sarah Habibi, representing Ontario Tech University.
If I were to ask you, what's the #1 cause of death in livestock worldwide, what would you guess? The answer? Homuncus contortus, also known as the barber pole worm. A parasite so advanced that it once originated in sub-Saharan African countries and now has adapted to thrive in much colder temperatures as they propagate freely on our coasts of Nova Scotia. This tiny roundworm utilizes a single tooth to hook into the stomach and feed on the blood of livestock animals, including cattle, goats, and sheep. Imagine a single goat can harbor up to 10,000 worms, collectively consuming 15% of the animal's blood volume each week. This results in severe blood loss and ultimately death of the animal. Now, the magnitude of this problem directly impacts so many players, from cattle and goat farmers in developed countries to small African tribes who rely on goats for milk and protein for survival. Of course, like every tragic story, there's often a solution. And in this case, the solution comes in the form of anti-parasitic pharmaceutical drugs. These drugs act at targeting protein receptors in the parasites, resulting in their death. Perfect. End of story. Well, not just yet. Most parasites, especially the barber pole worm, are notorious for developing resistance to all current pharmaceuticals, rendering these drugs ineffective. And one of the driving reasons for this high prevalence of resistance is the fact that all current pharmaceuticals target the same type of proteins in the worms. So,
Clearly, there is a serious need for the identification of new drug targets in these parasites. This is exactly where my research comes in. We have identified a new family of drug targets in these parasites that, when acted on by various drugs, result in paralysis and death of the worms. Of even more interest, these drug targets are only present in parasitic worms and absent in mammals. Therefore, a drug designed to selectively target these proteins in parasites would have absolutely no effect on the host mammal you are administering the drug to. Collectively, this research has the ability to mitigate the parasite resistance problem, potentially save the agricultural industry billions of dollars each year, and allow for cattle and goats to thrive happily in areas of ecological and human importance. I mean, come on, doesn't every goat deserve to be this happy? Thank you.
Now, from the University of Waterloo, please welcome Haya Al-Mutairi.
You can't run from it. You can't hide from it. It's coming. Summer road construction. Nothing can ruin the excitement of a family vacation or a road trip with friends like construction. I don't know about you, but I hate construction. Okay, let's say it in a different way. I don't hate construction if it doesn't get in my way. I hate having to take detours or drive slower. I know the cracks on the pavement need to be fixed as they directly affect riding comfort and cause safety issues because cracks lead to potholes, which can cause accidents or damage your car. So why can't those cracks just heal themselves? Why can't we build roads to last longer? And here is where my research will contribute. I am working on developing a self-healing pavement. This innovative idea is inspired by the human body, specifically its ability to adapt, evolve, and heal itself. My research will leverage different strategies to create a range of high-performance asphalt mixes. I will explore the use of self-healing materials, nanomaterials, and phase change materials. The most interesting one, in my opinion, is the phase change materials, as these materials have the capability to store and release large amount of energy as temperature goes up or down, which can be very useful for Canadian weather. This material will be effective when the crack is in its micro size, when it's smaller than we can see. As shown in the healing process picture, these materials act as bandages that will hold the two sides of the crack together, arresting further degradation and making the healing process faster. The incredible part of this process that it can be done several times during the service life of the road. Ultimately, this research aims to contribute to the construction of a highly durable and long-lasting pavement in Canada and in the world. Maybe we can't run from construction, but at least we can delay it. Thank you.
Next, welcome Shane Saunderson from the University of Toronto.
What do robots, jelly beans, and getting angry at your computer have in common? This isn't the start of a bad joke, but if it were, you'd all be the punchline, because these three things are teaching me to manipulate you. Let me explain. In the mid-90s, there was research coming out of Stanford that came to be known as the media equation. Their experiments were very, very simple. Participants were asked to come in and have a social interaction with a computer for a few minutes before eventually being asked to give feedback about that computer. Now, the feedback was given in one of two ways. They would either give a survey on the same computer that they just interacted with, or they'd give feedback on a second computer, still in the same room. Now, what the researchers found was that when the feedback was given on the second computer, participants were far more critical of the original computer's interaction. Think about that for a second. That means that if you're going to give feedback on the same computer you've just interacted with, you're somehow reluctant to hurt that computer's feelings. Now, this phenomenon also became known as CASA, or computers as social actors, because what the researchers realized was that we are so hardwired for this social connection that, in fact, we'll forgo reality for a minute and say, yes, this computer has feelings, and no, I don't want to hurt them. This would, of course, fascinate researchers for decades to come, who'd explore the phenomenon in computers and other media like robots, and that's where my research comes in. I look at persuasive robotics, bit of an ominous term there, and this is where the jelly beans also come into play. I, too, ran some pretty simple experiments. I asked my participants to come in, take a look at a jelly bean jar, and guess the number of jelly beans in that jar, with a little bit of a twist. On either side of the jar were two robots that would pop up and, using different tactics, try to persuade you to change your answer. Now, these tactics were classic things from psychology. They could be things like using logic, so my computer vision system can detect 943 jelly beans in the jar, to secrecy or exclusivity, like, psst, don't tell anyone I told you, but there are 642 jelly beans in the jar. However, the most persuasive one was actually an emotional strategy. It would make me happy if you use my guess of 714 jelly beans in the jar. This threw my engineering brain for a little bit of a loop until I started thinking again about the media equation. And you see, much like their participants didn't want to hurt the computer's feeling, my participants were so hardwired for this social connection that they wanted to make my robot happy. So, if I've figured out how to emotionally manipulate you all with robots, what am I doing here instead of taking over the world? I'd like to think I'm a little bit more morally rooted than that. So instead, I'm here to inform you that, yes, the machines are coming, but they're not coming as coworkers or caregivers or companions. They're coming as, they're not coming as terminators, they're coming as coworkers or caregivers. And they're coming to persuade you. So you need to be ready for this so that you can make informed decisions. Thank you.
Next, from OCAD University, please welcome Uttara Gotke.
Let me start with a question. Can you explain the shape of a square to a blind learner without the use of any tools? Can you do it? Sure you can. It's quite simple. A square is a shape with 4 sides of the same length and 4 corners with 90 degrees. That was quite simple, wasn't it? Now can you explain the shape of Australia in a similar manner? No, you cannot. It is almost impossible to explain an abstract shape without the use of any supporting tools. Blind and low vision learners rely on special learning aids, such as braille maps, tactile graphics, and audio instructions to learn about geospatial information. However, all of these possess several challenges, aren't readily available, and often too expensive to purchase. Firstly, braille cannot be scaled, so these maps are quite big. Secondly, braille is also very low in resolution. And lastly, according to the World Health Organization, only 10% of the world's blind population is braille literate. I argue that inclusive and cross-sensory research methods should be used while designing such learning aids. Cross-sensory tools employ more than one sensory modality to explain information in a more detailed manner. My research is primarily motivated when I met my first blind participant during a previous class project. He revealed to me that he's never known the shape of the world in spite of using all the available learning aids. In order to address this problem, I recruited the same participant to be a part of multiple co-design sessions where he helped me design a 3D cross-sensory globe. As you see here on the right, the cross-sensory globe consists of 3D printed detachable continents to convey more abstract features about the Earth. That is the shape and size of the countries and continents, and also the land elevation. At the same time, it uses audio labels and a wireless touch audio pen to convey more concrete features about the Earth. That is the names of cities, countries, and continents. After testing this globe with 5 other visually impaired learners, it did reveal that the globe helped them to create a better mental picture of our world. Lastly, I do want this globe to be readily available and easily reproducible for any blind learner in our world. I strongly believe that this is the first step in creating more inclusive, cross-sensory geography learning aids. Thank you.
Now, from Western University, please welcome Yal Sway.
I have a secret to tell you. I'm psychic. No, really, I bet I can tell you what you did yesterday, what you're doing today, and what you're going to do tomorrow. In fact, it's the same thing you're all doing right now. It's sitting. Okay, so obviously I'm not actually psychic, but I do know the average Canadian spends almost 11 hours a day engaged in sedentary behaviors, like sitting, reclining, and lying. And not the lying I just did, but like lying down. When you think about it, we are sedentary almost everywhere. In our cars, at work, at school, with our friends, even eating. So what's the big idea? Why is sitting so bad? Well, research has shown that the longer we sit for, and the more often we sit, the greater our risk for chronic diseases like heart disease, hypertension, diabetes, even some cancers. But what if there's more to health than just chronic disease? Imagine a healthy person. What do they look like? It can be hard to see things like heart disease or hypertension, but they look happy. And they probably feel happy too. And if you were to ask them how satisfied they are with life, they'd probably say, pretty satisfied. So instinctively, we know there's more to health than just the absence of chronic disease. In my field, we call this subjective well-being, and it essentially encompasses how you feel and how satisfied with life you are. Now, I know what you're thinking, figuratively. What does sitting have to do with subjective well-being? Well, those same high levels of sitting that lead to chronic disease might also be linked to lower subjective well-being. But here's the question. Does higher sitting cause lower subjective well-being, or does lower subjective well-being lead to more sitting? So that's the thing we don't know yet. But don't worry, that's why I'm here. My research manipulates the sedentary behavior of university students to see the impact it has on their subjective well-being. For example, we could take an active university student and make them more sedentary. What impact would that have on their subjective well-being? And vice versa with an inactive student. Answers to these questions are important. Remember how much sitting we do as Canadians? It's a lot. And the problem is there are no guidelines for sedentary behavior, unlike physical activity. But if we can show that changing our sitting can positively impact our subjective well-being, well, maybe we can inform guidelines. Maybe we can improve the health of all Canadians. Maybe we can make life a little more satisfying. So please, stand up with me. It's honestly mostly to make me feel better, but it'll make you feel better too. Thank you.
And now, please welcome Jordan Sutcliffe, representing Nipissing University.
I'd like to begin with a story. John is a 41-year-old financial advisor, happily married with a 12-year-old son, nice house, golden retriever, your typical picture-perfect life. However, at work, John doesn't seem to have much in common with his colleagues. It's taking years from ever see a promotion, and the money he does manage to save goes directly into the mortgage or future college tuition. No matter how hard John seems to work, he never truly feels a direct return on his efforts and finds it near impossible to be excited about anything during working hours. There is, however, one area of John's life in which he always looks forward to: his son's participation in minor hockey. John anticipates his son's games all week long. When he's at the rink, he feels confident. He feels in control. At the rink, everybody knows John. Well, how could you not? When the ref makes a bad call, John will let you know. When the coach isn't playing everyone a fair amount, John will let you know. So from 9 to 5, John knows is competent, hardworking advisor with a respectable life. Yet, when 7:30 rolls around and John walks through those arena doors, he's now termed something that we're all familiar with, the crazy hockey parent. So the question I want to answer is the following. Why does watching your child play hockey turn normal, everyday, successful adults into aggressive, trash-talking fanatics? Hockey parents invest a lot in their child's sport experience. They assume the role of a coach, benefactor, taxi driver, equipment manager, and even athletic therapist. So it isn't crazy to think that parents may want a return on their investment, whether it be in the form of immediate skill development or future financial reimbursement. Nonetheless, that still doesn't convince me why parents are so quick to release a week's worth of aggression at the rink. I have a new idea for why this might be happening. That idea is identity. Every single one of us in this room have all kinds of identities. You can identify with personal, individual-based things, such as being a CEO, a musician, or just your plain old hockey dad. You can also identify with things socially, such as work or exercise groups, or being a member of the Marauders. The link between identity and behavior has been repeatedly displayed in organizational settings, extremist groups, and under my hypotheses, hockey parents. Therefore, the purpose of my research is to understand whether personal identity and social identity relate to how parents are behaving in and around minor hockey. I strongly believe that the strength of one's identity as a hockey mom or dad, or as a member of the Bulldogs, Huskies, Marauders, whatever it may be, has a direct effect on the unacceptable parent behavior we read about a few times a week in the media. Leaving this problem unsolved has serious implications for sport participation rates, family relationships, and the modeling of poor behavior without consequence. Let's end this toxic culture immediately and prove that parenting in Canadian hockey can carry a sense of pride and morality. Thank you.
Okay, so that brings us to the end of the 2019 Ontario 3-minute thesis. I think our competitors deserve another round of applause. And I really have to wish good luck to our judges because they have a very difficult task ahead of them. While our judges deliberate, we remind those of you with a name tag that you will be joining us for lunch. If you need help finding your way to that lunch, we have several members of our School of Graduate Studies staff here to help you and navigate your way across campus.
Once they've made their decision, the judges will join us for lunch and the winners will be announced. We would like to thank our presenters for their efforts today. Great work. As well, thank you to the faculty, support staff, friends, and family who joined us here today in support of these competitors. And finally, thanks to you, our audience, for joining us here in the concert hall or tuning in on our live stream. There's no doubt that we have all learned about some very cool research and innovative research being done by graduate researchers in Ontario.
Thanks, everyone.